Hello, and welcome to It's an Artful Life. I'm your host, Jillian Rhodes. This project started with a question: do the arts matter anymore? I decided to start asking people that very question and came up with this project, an experiment on how, and if, people see and experience the arts in their daily lives. Is it an artful life? Let's find out. I've come to realize, however, that while technology may make it more convenient to communicate, it doesn't improve our ability to get a point across. This is a quote from John Maeda, one of the leading proponents of STEAM, that is, including the arts in with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. The technology community somewhat embraces the arts, but doesn't necessarily include them. My interviewee today is a journalist who has actually reported on the confluence of tech and the arts, and we talk about her findings, as well as how the arts help us to communicate in a more authentic way. To start with, could you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Naz. In full, it's Nastaran Tavakoli-Far, which is a bit of a mouthful. So that's Iranian. My parents are Persian. I'm a journalist, and I've mostly been covering news, like as in global news, as well as business, tech, entrepreneurship, and also the cross-section between tech and the arts. That's something I did quite a bit on a few years ago, and I think it's become sort of a bigger area of interest recently. I actually did quite a bit of work about STEAM, which is the concept of adding art to STEM. So that was kind of interesting. Again, that was about 5 years ago, and I think now it's like a little bit more of a given that we need the arts and, technology. So that's a little bit on me, yeah.
It's delightful that you're doing that, just because I don't hear about the arts as much as I hear about technology. So it's really good to hear that's something that's happening.
The question you're trying to answer in your podcast is really interesting because it's something I think about a lot these days. Maybe I think about it more in the form of the fact that our cultural heroes right now tend to be sort of people in business and tech. And I feel like when I was growing up, which wasn't that long ago, I know I sound like a grandmother, but I feel like when I was growing up, our cultural heroes were sort of like musicians or film stars or whatever. And I feel like those people are less visible in a sense, or you have maybe 3 or 4 really famous people, in the arts, but not as much as before. I feel like we don't look to cultural people about questions of life or, just these kind of questions of living anymore. It's more like, let's ask Sheryl Sandberg 20 questions on life advice. I don't know. I do wonder if there's been that shift, or I wonder if it's more me and the circles I am in these days. But I do think it is a bigger cultural shift that, since when did technologists become our rock stars in a way? I kind of wonder what that says about society. Yeah.
So I'd be really interested to hear. It's completely on a tangent from the kind of the standard mode here, but I was just, and so you're talking about working a lot with the tech and the arts. So what did you find in doing that?
So most of the research was when I was at grad school in New York about sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and it was based around the ITP, which is a department at NYU, where they bring together designers and technology people to study together and create things with each other. And it was set up by this woman called Red Burns, who's since passed away, but she was quite pioneering and being one of the sort of early people who was into bringing together the arts and tech and stuff. It was interesting. I think when I was there, I was kind of just when I was there reporting, because I was there as a journalist, not as a student, it was interesting looking at how people were working together. And I think there was an increasing sort of realization amongst technologists that we need to humanize what we make and make it more relatable. Hence why there was this interest in bringing in artists and designers. I was also interviewing John Mader. I don't know if you know him, but he used to be the president of the Rhode Island School of Design, who is one of the main people who's been pushing this STEAM concept of adding art to STEM. And he has like a design background and a computer science background. Super interesting guy. So I feel like 4 or 5 years on, now that I look at the findings and what's been going on in the world, it seems a little bit more that maybe the technology people have sought out artists and designers to help them make their technology more marketable or more relatable to the public. But I think, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but I think they sort of got what they wanted out of the artists and out of artistic thinking, rather than actually listening to the broader things that the arts can bring. You know, it seems a little bit selective, like, yeah, help make our product look better or be easier to use or look friendlier or something. Like, it's a little bit like, maybe I'm being unfair, but it seems a little bit of a leeching, no, that's not a good word. It seems a little bit of a maybe opportunistic, selective relationship that they had with the arts. Because I'm not saying, because the arts has been such an important part of us processing our emotions and trying to make sense of the world and trying to find out the meaning of life. And I don't think any of that stuff has translated from the arts to tech.
Yeah, because it becomes very much about the brand, you know, and how do you brand yourself and all that stuff. Okay, so do you consider yourself an artistic person?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, when I was younger, I was really into art, and I was very good, actually. I used to play instruments and stuff, but more fine art, I was really good. So when I was kind of choosing what to do at university, I did think about art school and stuff, but then I went and did economics. It was like a totally different thing. But yeah, I think the arts are really important, and I do kind of wonder what's happened to them socially.
Do you have a particularly memorable experience of the arts?
Yeah, I do actually. It was May 2005. I remember this quite clearly. There was a big retrospective of Caravaggio here in London, and I feel like there are a handful of moments in my life that really changed me and had quite a huge emotional impact, and that was one of them. I've always really liked his work, but I just think seeing it up close, not only seeing it up close, but the way it was curated was like incredibly moving. I especially remember, I don't know if you know his painting, The Flagellation of Christ, and the way it was hung when you had to sort of come around the corner and it, like through the doorway, it was just really powerful. And it is kind of interesting because, like, I guess with the internet and the internet being so visual, we probably see a lot of these images all the time. But I don't think I'd appreciated curation as much as that exhibition, because just the way they were hung and stuff had a real effect. That's one thing that sticks out. Also, music as well. I'm just trying to think of maybe one example, but I think music is especially interesting because it's a way of sort of, it's highly spiritual, basically. It's a way of trying to commune is maybe the right word. I feel like it's quite hard to talk about music because music deals with emotions and sides of us that are really hard to put into words. Maybe hence why I find it very spiritual. Another moment that I can clearly remember is when I first heard Blind Willie Johnson. He is this blues musician. And I'd consider myself a very spiritual person as well. And it was on this compilation of old blues songs. And he has this song, what's it called? I know all the lyrics. Nobody's Fault But Mine, where he's talking about it's nobody's fault but mine if he doesn't read the Bible. And it's just like, it was just so powerful. It was like kind of properly one of these like being shot in the head moments, listening to that. But with music, I can think of so many examples of a time when a piece of music or a song has connected with parts of me that are really difficult to talk about. Not difficult to talk about because, I don't know, it's really upsetting or it's shameful or something, but just parts of you where there are very few words to describe those experiences, hence why it feels very spiritual. And it's funny with music as well, because I feel in some ways it is so commodified right now. Maybe, again, I'm just showing my age, but yeah. Actually, I don't know if you've seen Lemonade by Beyonce. I've never been a Beyonce fan, and I had sort of dismissed this thing, and then a friend and I, we got together to watch it because we're not Beyonce fans, and we were like, oh, this will be really amusing, and we watched it, and it was really, really good. And the other week, I watched it 4 times in a row because it was really, really good. And one of the reasons why I feel it was really good was it brought together all these things I really appreciate about the arts. So it's like this big narrative story that's about this woman and an infidelity, but it's actually, I thought it was actually much more fundamental. And as a woman, I could just connect with so many statements in it. And it was just a really good example of like the power of poetry, the power of music, the power of the visual realm, you know what I mean? And so that kind of made me excited if, like, you know, certain artists who have big reach can still put out pieces where we appreciate the arts, you know, because it wasn't like an intellectual discussion about, I don't know, being a black woman in America. It was just done so powerfully through an artistic medium. And I kind of, I feel like that's become less of a thing. So it's exciting if things like that will inspire more of that. Like, yeah, it kind of hits you on a level that an intellectual debate can't, which is essentially what a lot of art does, right? And it's just a shame that that's kind of not as much of a thing in our society right now. It's more like, you know, discussion and debating rather than trying to, like, experience these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But in terms of dailiness, you know, art that's around you right now, art that's around you when you go to the subway, for example, or do you think that you experience art on a daily basis like that?
Yeah, I think being in a city like London, you do. And I say that more in terms of architecture, maybe. I spend quite a lot of time in central London just because of the work I do. And you do get that sense of a city that, I don't know anything about London city planning, so maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of the buildings do give you the feeling of there is a reason why this is here and why this street has been made the way it has been. I notice that more when I've been away and I've been somewhere where there isn't that sense, where, like, you know, architecture is just very functional and it's just there to, you know, they're just buildings that people are going to work inside or live inside. And then when you come back to the city where, like, yeah, you feel like the buildings have a greater social purpose, to give you a sense of, depends what it is, but yeah, I think I notice that quite a lot on a daily basis, just like my surroundings in the city. But I don't know if art and architecture, if you count them, I feel like architecture can be an artistic medium, so I don't know if you'd count that as a way that art affects me daily.
I am not personally excluding anything from my definition when I ask that question. So with that in mind, if that were to be removed, that kind of architecture, you know, and you've talked about it being specific to London and you notice it elsewhere, you know, what's that like? What lacks for you if that is not there?
Okay, so I mentioned about when I was reporting in New York when I was at grad school. That was somewhere where architecturally I found it really strange because I think there is a real lack of public space in New York. Like you have, like, you know, Central Park or maybe a few kind of public spaces, and I think I really noticed that. It was this sense of there's nowhere to go if I just want to sit and think for a minute. And that really struck me, and it made me feel very claustrophobic. No, claustrophobic's the wrong word. It made me feel very under pressure and tense. Whereas I think London has a lot of public spaces, even small squares. You're always, like, really close to just a small public square where you can just sit for 10 minutes and think. I really noticed the lack of that being in New York, and I just felt very tense and on edge all the time. And also, like, politically as well, it kind of bothered me. I felt a bit like, if you all want to gather in one place to, like, celebrate something or make a statement, like, I can't think of many places you could do that there. So not only did I feel on edge personally, but I don't know, there was like a sort of political, maybe even existential feeling of on edgeness, of like, you are really on your own. There is no unity. I felt that really strongly there. So coming back to London, I think I suddenly really appreciated all these small little squares you always have where, you know, sometimes there might only be 5 people sitting there, but it's there for you.
Okay, it's almost like a sense of peace with the experience of the art, the architecture, the public spaces.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me. I remember once, I think it's the guy who does the music for The Simpsons. I can't remember his name, but I remember in one interview, he was talking about making music for The Simpsons, and he said something like, I know we've done our job properly if you don't notice that it's there, but when it's not there, you'll notice. And actually, having talked about the small public squares in London, I think, I probably didn't notice them until I was somewhere where I didn't have access to that. So, yeah.
Okay, the next question is it's still on this sort of thought experiment vein, and that's kind of the opposite version of the previous question, which is, you know, all of this stuff is still there, but kind of like you before you left, you had no experience of it. You could not experience it. You could not get anything from it, you know, so the artists that you described, the music that kind of really touched you, you know, if all of that was still around, but we couldn't experience it as such, you know, what would that be like?
I would probably feel dead. I would personally feel dead. I think society would be very clinical. It would be lacking in a lot of emotion. And also, I think, sorry, maybe going on a tangent, I think the other important thing about the arts, which you don't get as much in sort of intellectual culture maybe, is that, you know, so much of life and our experiences and our feelings are complicated and nuanced and in conflict, you know. And so when you have a culture where it's like, you know, very much people discussing ideas, there's often the sense that you have to have a clear-cut idea to be able to have a discussion, or at least a lot of the discussions I see today are like that, which makes it very antagonistic. There isn't room for all the complexities of life, which is something that's great about the arts. You just get a much richer tapestry of the world. So I feel like if we didn't have that, the world would be pretty sterile. I'd feel pretty dead. And I think we'd have just such a lack of understanding of humans. And that's kind of terrifying.
Especially these days. So what do you think it means to live an artful life?
I think noticing your surroundings. Noticing your surroundings and like just people around you and having some level of sensitivity as well is really important. Again, I think it's getting out the realm of like thinking and just being rational and approaching the world in that way and trying to listen and see and notice what's going on and being sensitive to that and to like how nuanced everything is, which is essentially what I think is like one of the main strengths of the arts. So if you can sort of weave that into just how you are every day, then I'd say you're probably living artfully.
You know, if you have anything that you'd like to add, you know, final comments or thought?
Again, because, sorry, maybe I'm repeating myself, but again, I just feel like our culture right now, maybe the culture I'm in is so based on being rational and having to, like, argue things in a very debate style, you know? And so many of our experiences are, like, so multifaceted. And this kind of opinion culture, I think, is problematic because it just means you don't actually get to properly experience or talk about life. You don't get that kind of texture and fabric.
Thank you so much for bringing your perspective.
Cool.
I haven't talked to a journalist yet, so it's delightful. It's an Artful Life will return next week with another interview. Thanks for listening.